morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful spring day. We appreciate you taking the time to attend our Safety Council meeting. I am Michelle Bach, and it's my pleasure to be here. And there really are no announcements this morning, so I will just go ahead and turn it over to Craig, who is filling in for Steve Roth this morning.
Well, thanks, Michelle. I appreciate that. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. If you've dealt with the vaccinations and you're looking for ways to get some assistance, there's still websites out there. There's a vaccine website or management systems web page you can go to help you find out whether you're eligible. And I think by now everybody knows that everybody's eligible, provided you're not under 16, and you can get an appointment set up with this. These websites that I'm mentioning, as always, are links, and they're hyperlinks. I don't know what the actual sites are generally, but you can get to this off of our website, the BWC's website. You can find this information. OSHA has up there, or included in their emphasis program, a direction where they're looking at high hazard industries to protect them from contracting COVID. So you might want to know that OSHA is looking at this kind of stuff. If you are out there and you have what is potentially a high hazard industry, and you don't have any kind of COVID protections in place, it could end up being problematic if OSHA shows up. About this time of year, OSHA generally publishes their top 10 list. You can get access to that and see what kinds of things they have looked at in the last year. If you find that on walk-arounds of your facility, if you have any of those top 10 things, you may want to take some actions to sort of get involved and make them go away before OSHA finds them. Again, with the COVID stuff, and I know this is tiresome, but it is where we are. It's our world. As everybody's re-engaging now, work is restarting or has been going on, and the rules are changing. People are getting vaccinated. They're starting to let their guards down perhaps a little bit. On the website from OSHA, there's a bunch of information about assembly line work, about hand washing practices in both English and Spanish. There's a list of things that help you just remind your people how to protect themselves, how not to take this too lightly at this point. And it's still a potential problem for a lot of people. If you're confused or not completely comfortable with what fully vaccinated means, the CDC's got some information that they have released about describing what it means, how you interact with somebody else when you've been vaccinated and when they have, or when they haven't been vaccinated, or when they're not fully vaccinated. So you might want to have a look at that. We have a pretty interesting webinar coming up on April the 21st. And this is from a gentleman who has written a best-selling book about hand safety. This is an occupational health and safety webinar. It's free, and it talks about how to protect the hands, making sure that we don't run the risk of the thing that keeps us as independent and mobile as pretty much anything else that we have available to us, at least to which we're permanently attached. Fall protection is always a thing. American Society of Safety Professionals talk about fall protection, how to prevent fall protection, questions about fall incidents. Obviously, that's one of the top 10 every year are falls, and we want to make sure we're preventing those as much as we can. I want to reinforce with you that although we are still not able to come out and visit you directly, we are able to deal with things virtually. We can take images that you've collected from the plant floor. We can do FaceTime or live Teams meetings and Microsoft Teams or Zoom meetings, and we can look around and we can talk to you. You can send us written programs. We can evaluate, review, and update some of your written programs. Our industrial hygienists have limited capabilities for doing some air sampling and some minimal noise sampling, and we can walk you through that sort of thing. We have just finished publishing a whole new list of sample programs. So if you're looking to update your programs, or in some cases just start them, on our website we have safety sample programs available to you that you can find as a template for how to write your own. But at least you get a good sense of what needs to be in a program, so that you can create one that is germane to where you are and what you do. We are running toward the end of the year, our fiscal year, and we still have classes available online. A lot of our classes were canceled, as is understandable, but we've shifted, and many of those canceled classes have been reinvigorated to the online classes for credit. So if you're in one of our programs, industry-specific safety program, or one claim, or one of the other programs where you need to have training classes, we're still offering. We're still here, we're just not there. We have with us today a friend of mine. Actually, I'm quite pleased to be able to introduce her. I've worked with Kathleen for pretty much most of the time I've been here. She's a business consultant for the Southwest, for all of Southwest Ohio. That includes Montgomery County, Preble, Butler, and Hamilton counties. She's been with us since 1994. And while she's been here, she's worked as an employer service specialist and a claims service specialist. So she really knows that side of the house, and she knows it really well. She has experience with helping out Ohio employers in their risk management questions and concerns, as well as claims management and even safety solutions. She's on top of stuff. So without any further ado, please let me hear a warm virtual welcome for our speaker, Kathleen Davenport.
Good morning. Thanks, Craig. I also wanted to thank Craig Smith. I know that a lot of you may have interacted with him through the years, and he's getting ready to retire in less than 60 days. So he's on the countdown, and he has been a wealth of knowledge for our Division of Safety and Hygiene for many, many years. We had a conversation yesterday, and it was very nice, and it just made me realize how valuable of an employee that he is, and certainly our Division of Safety and Hygiene will miss him once he's gone. He always keeps us on his toes. He's a realistic person when it comes to life and safety. And so, Craig, thank you for all that you've done over the years. And Craig started the paper route at the age of 11, and he is getting ready for the first time in his life to be not employed and retired. So I hope you enjoy your retirement come June 4th, and we will miss you greatly. So with that, I wanted to get on with my presentation, Work from Home Considerations and BWC Update. Through the course of the last several months, we've had a lot of questions, and that's kind of the basis for my presentation, is trying to answer some of those questions that have been raised from me to me, over the past several months, over a year now, since we all been working from home. As you can see, I'm at home. I'm in my dining room. We all have the challenges of working from home. I was online this weekend ordering some things, so you might hear my doorbell ring with some deliveries that might cause my dogs to start barking. I think I have them contained and happy, at least for the next hour or so. And my high school senior is upstairs still in bed, so hopefully that he continues to sleep until at least the end of the presentation. But these are all challenges that we've had over the past year. Some of us, still have that. Like Craig mentioned, we are still all working from home, and at least, for the near term, we're anxious to, at some point, to get out and back to normal. So hopefully we'll be out with you guys sometime soon, but we're just waiting on further direction and see where this virus continues to take us. So with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about some work at home injuries. Potentially working from home, you can be injured. And I don't think many people thought of work at home injuries prior to a year ago. Some employers had people teleworking, but the majority of people were in plants. And so wanted to kind of talk about that, because really the law hasn't changed as far as what is compensable. It is a little bit different with work from home injuries, because it's a work environment that you don't necessarily control, and you don't necessarily know what's going on. And so to kind of just recap, what is a compensable claim? It is an injury that happens in the course of and rising out of employment. An example of this, might be if I do get that delivery to my door, and I go to open it, and it's a box of supplies from my boss. So I go into the kitchen, I get a box cutter, I open it, and I cut my finger. and I look inside the box, and my boss sent me Post-it notes and staplers and supplies to work from home. If that cut from that box cutter at that point would be considered compensable because I was doing something that was for the benefit of the employer. I was opening that box of supplies that came to me in the course of my employment. So that is something to be considered compensable. Now, if it was a birthday present that my sister sent me, that is not compensable. I might have answered the door and got my package in the course of my employment, but it was not arising out of my employment. So that is kind of the distinction between, what might happen from home. Is a little more challenging when, it is a work from home injury. So you want to be careful in making sure you're documenting, asking open-ended questions of your employees, complete an accident report just like you would. Those are all things that we would like to see when adjudicating initially a claim. A lot of you will know the process of claims management. The Bureau has the first bite at the apple. We look at the medical evidence on file and make that initial determination on a claim. If somebody disagrees, whether it's the employer or the injured worker, they have a right to appeal that to the Industrial Commission. And within the Industrial Commission, there's 2 hearings potentially. There's a district hearing, and then there's a staff hearing officer that could hear it if it's appealed subsequently. And then ultimately it could go up into court. So kind of keep that in mind. I mean, in defending a claim from an employer standpoint, you really have to potentially defend it, several times. Each time there might be some different medical evidence that's presented. So it might be initially there's nothing in the claim, no medical evidence to make that decision, so we may deny it. And then by the time it gets to hearing, the medical comes in and the staff or the district hearing officer or the staff hearing officer hears different set of evidence. So that's something to keep in mind. But as far as work from home, one of the advice that I would give you is to make sure that you're still doing that accident investigation and try to ask as many questions about what surrounded that injury. Now, we haven't seen a lot of these, but potentially they're there, and potentially as businesses try to decide whether the work from home is something that they want to continue more permanently, then that's something I think going forward to kind of have on your plate to kind of work through a process to investigate those accidents. Some employers will go to the employee site and get a feel for what type of hazards, a hazard assessment of their own home. But it is important to kind of keep that in mind, that there are some potential hazards. But what we want to make sure that is the injury, it has to be arising out of employment, and not just because they're in the course of employment doesn't mean it was arising out of employment. So keep that in mind. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is COVID-19 claims. So we have seen COVID-19 claims. Typically, communicable diseases are not workers' compensation. We've seen this in the past with the flu and some other things, and the reason it's generally not is because you can contract that in various ways. And with COVID-19, you could get it at the grocery store, you could get it with friends, you could, there's a number of ways you could be exposed. But there are some hazards, some jobs that have a greater degree of hazard. And I think we can all agree with a lot of this. Healthcare and first responders. We saw this a lot early on. Healthcare and first responders contracting COVID as a course of and arising out of the employment. So we could, actually allow the claim, and we have allowed some claims. We have a dedicated staff up in Columbus who handles all of the COVID-related claims. And the reason why we do that is we want to make sure that that claim is valid and compensable. We want to look at all of those special circumstances. We partner with our policy department, our law department as part of that team, and some claims reps that have been selected to be on that team who have an eye to be able to look and do that investigation thoroughly, because we know that it's a little bit different than any other claim. So we have a dedicated staff that handles that. And again, we're looking to make sure that happened in the course of and arising out of employment. Now that we have vaccines available, there's a little bit different twist with that. Not only were we initially looking at COVID-19 claims as being potentially compensable, now we're also looking at vaccines, and if people have a negative reaction to the next vaccine, is that compensable? So that's a different twist that same team is going to be evaluated. And so these are very specific claims, and claims can, I have all the time, I have people contacting me and ask me, do you think that this and this and this and this should be allowed if this set of circumstances? And it's hard because there could be a slightly different change in this fact pattern that could change that decision as far as the claim is concerned. There's certain things that are specifically outlined in the law that I think are easier to define, but there is also more of a gray area in some areas that that makes that scale of justice. You have to kind of weigh the evidence in a claim, and certain things will have more weight than others in certain situations. So it's always kind of hard to make those determinations. But if you do have any questions regarding that, we ask you to seek advice of legal counsel. There's many good workers' compensation attorneys out there that can help you through that. Also your third-party administrator, if you have them, help evaluate some of those situations. We also do have a COVID-19 email box that you can email questions, and you certainly can email me as well. My email address will be again at the end of the presentation. But so we do have an email box that's dedicated that goes to that team, and they try to answer those COVID related questions as quickly as possible. But they won't give you legal advice, but they can give you policy information regarding some of those. So wanted to give you some statistics on the COVID claims. And I mentioned before that healthcare and first responders, and it might be a little bit difficult to read, but healthcare and first responders are about 2/3 of the claims that we have for the COVID-19. This data is, as of the end of March, that we've had a total of 3,546 claims allowed for COVID-19. Most of which, as I stated, are first responders in healthcare. That's where we see the hazard that is greater than the normal in most of those. That doesn't mean, again, that's the only thing we look at. It's the evidence that's presented at the time. So that's a combination of both self-insured and state fund claims within BWC. And this breaks it down into accepted, which was allowed, denied claims, dismissed claims. So we had a lot of claims early on, especially a year ago, that was filed, that was ultimately dismissed. We had a lot of people thinking they were filing for unemployment and they were filing for workers' compensation. So those claims were ultimately dismissed. We had claims that were filed for COVID that tested negative for COVID. So those claims were obviously denied as well. So there's lots of reasons, dismissed. So there's lots of reasons why claims might have been dismissed, especially early on. Sometimes we just don't have the medical evidence in the file to make those determinations as well. So there are many times these COVID claims were ultimately dismissed, which means BWC doesn't make a decision. It's neither an allowed nor disallowed claim. The other topic that comes up frequently is working outside Ohio. So, with a lot of people working from home now, some people might live out of state, and this is where working outside of Ohio becomes a question that employers should deal with. So Ohio's workers' compensation does cover employees that are temporarily working out of the state if that employee files in Ohio. So we can't control, you can't control as an employer where the claim is filed. Certainly you have some opportunities to educate your employees that might be working out of state temporarily of your workers' compensation benefits that they're entitled to in Ohio. But there might be reasons why it's filed in another state. Maybe they've talked to an attorney in another state that wants it filed in another state. Maybe it's a situation where the provider is not familiar with Ohio workers' compensation and they file it with another state. So we certainly cannot address any claim that's filed outside of Ohio. As an employer, I would certainly educate your employees that if they're injured, they are covered, still covered, if they are temporary. The thing that we're starting to see now is temporary is turning into permanent in a lot of situations. So kind of keep that in mind as well. If there are states that require you to get workers' compensation in that state the minute you cross that border, so keep that in mind. Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Michigan are states that tend to want you to have workers' compensation as soon as you cross the border. Indiana is a little more friendlier to Ohio employers. So you want to make sure you know what state you're working in and whether or not that they require workers' compensation coverage immediately. I worked with a trucking company that had a dump site in Kentucky. And they called me one day because they were at the site dumping their materials at the dump site. And at the dump site, they were stopped by an individual from the Kentucky Department of Insurance, wanted to see their workers' compensation. So they provided to them their Ohio workers' compensation policy. All of their work, for the most part, was done in Ohio. Very little, there was no work done. They would just dump their materials, at the trash yard in Kentucky. They wanted to see their Kentucky workers' compensation. So that was something that they needed to work with the state of Kentucky because they did not at that time have coverage. So keep that in mind. If you have employees working from home and they live in another state, you're going to consider whether or not you need coverage in that state. And it's going to be state by state specific. So we do recommend that you get a policy in another state if that employee was hired to work in that state. If you have an employee that you hired and he's going to work in Illinois, and that you need to make sure you have coverage in Illinois or whatever state that individual is working. If you have an Ohio-based employee that works in another jurisdiction for an extended period of time, you might want to consider having that other state's coverage as well. And then, like I mentioned before, there are some states that their law requires you to have coverage in their state, even for temporary exposures. So I encourage you to look at that. And we do have on our website, we do have, if you search working outside of Ohio, we have a pretty extensive information out there that you can go to each state and look at what the reciprocal agreements are. So if you go to our website, go up to the search bar at the top and type working outside of Ohio, that brings up a lot of great options for you and a lot of good information. So what are your coverage options if you do need coverage out of state? So BWC has an other states coverage, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. You can go to the private insurance market and get it through a private insurance. There are 4 monopolistic states. Ohio is one of them. North Dakota, Wyoming, and Washington are the other states. So they have state funds. And there are also states that have both a private and a state fund model. So they have both options. So you'll want to look at those options. One of the things that we did about 5 years ago is we wanted to offer Ohio employers an option within their workers' compensation policy in Ohio. So that's where we've developed our other states coverage. So this is a coverage, you pay premium through your policy, although it's tracked separately. So it's like a separate rider on your Ohio workers' compensation policy. We use Zurich to underwrite this optional coverage. So BWC contracts with Zurich. They have their own underwriting criteria that they use and rates that they use to determine. And so it's a great option to make sure that you're covered if you do have those other states' exposures. Again, our website, by searching working outside of Ohio, is a great source of information. And if you do have those exposures, even if they're temporary, I think it's worth going there and getting additional information. You can always contact me as well. Be happy to kind of walk you through that process or put you in contact with your employer service specialist who can also help you with that. So the next topic is reporting payroll for telecommuters. This is something that has kind of evolved over the course of the past year. Many of us are now telecommuting. So, what are some things that we have to offer? There is a manual classification for telecommuters. For private employers, it's 8871. And then we created a telecommuter classification for public employers, which is 9444. And these are separate classifications that can be added to your policy. And where this can be beneficial is if you had people that were normally reporting in your operating manual that is now working from home. These are classifications that you can use. For example, schools. I saw that we have several schools on. Schools, they could ask that 9444 be added to their policy for their teachers that are doing virtual teaching. That and even like early on, again, this has kind of changed, but early on last year, this time, all the schools went from in-person learning to remote learning. So all the teachers went home, they were working from home. Then starting the beginning of the year, different models, started to be implemented, whether it's, still a remote learning, a hybrid model, or an in-person learning. But 9444 can be used for that time when people were working from home. The rate is is less than the normal school classification. If 8871, if can be added for the private employers, and if you're a private employer who has an operating classification that is higher, and those people are now working from home, this might be a good option. If those employees are already reported under 8810, which is our clerical classification, then the clerical classification, you're better off just keeping that classification because the rate is lower than the telecommuting. So it is something that you want to evaluate independently. Again, I can help you with that. Your employer service specialist can help you with that as well. So it might be something to consider adding to your policy. There's information there on the slide on how to do that. You can call our 1-800 number, or the simplest way is to send an email to that email address, which goes directly to our classification unit, and they can add that to your policy. The other thing that I wanted to mention, I know for those of you who attended last month's meeting, you had an ergonomist come and talk to you about proper workstations and whatnot. But I did want to reiterate that a little bit because I think it's important. I know from me personally, sitting at home now, I sometimes my neck gets sore. I got to make sure I get up and walk around sometimes and make sure I have my monitor in the proper locations. And I actually have 3 monitors, so I have a lot to look at times. But want to make sure that everything's set up properly. I know they talked about that in great length last month, so I don't want to reiterate that. But Brad Ridenauer, which is one of Steve Roth's counterparts, and I think he's been out at the Safety Council as well, given some presentations over the years, kind of created a video, and I just thought it was worth sharing. So Carl, if you can switch us over to the work from home ergonomic video.
So today, because we're all sheltering in place and we're away from our height adjustable workstations and our keyboard trays and our ergonomic chairs, we're going to give you a few pointers on what we can do to relieve those aches and pains when you're sitting at your makeshift work at home office. Your chair obviously is not a properly designed ergonomic chair, but you still want to sit back, have good back support, feet flat on the floor, no pressure under the knees. Placement of your workstation is important for eye stress and strain. You don't want to be facing a window or have your back to the window. Facing the window has a lot of light variations that can cause eye stress. And your back to the window, you can get a lot of reflections on the screen itself. Positioning yourself on the table or changing the table so that you're perpendicular to the light source by 90 degrees is much, much better. Two ways to improve your comfort sitting in your chair. One, obviously, is to give yourself a little bit of padding. Don't make it too unstable. It should just be minor padding. The other thing is to give yourself lumbar support is very critical. Here I've got a hoodie just draped over the chair. This is a hand towel. Run the hand towel through the pocket, and you've got an adjustable height lumbar support that stays pretty well set to avoid pressure under the knees that cuts off circulation because your chair is slightly too high. Use a ream of paper, a large book, something that gets your feet up off the floor, but yet is stable. To keep a straight wrist is important and avoid the pressure from the edge of the table. Two things you can do. Find a binder that puts things at the appropriate angle for your keyboard. So even though you're sitting down lower, your wrists are still straight. I've just got a 3-ring binder with paper clips taped on, bent paper clips taped on. And then have a side table for your mouse. You're not reaching, it keeps the shoulders relaxed. To get papers off the desk, come up with your own copy holder. I've got some Legos from the kids, a pad of paper, and a chip clip to make my own copy holder. To avoid the bad posture holding the phone, headphones, earbuds, or if you're blessed to be in a quiet area, use speakerphone. It's much better on the neck and the back. With monitor height, the best setup is to move it so that the top of the screen is at eye level. It should be about arm's distance away. Depending on your vision, if you've got bifocals, down and low is probably better. Trifocals using the middle lens, probably higher and farther away. If you've got a laptop, you should always have a monitor with it if possible. If not, you would want to have a separate keyboard at least and use your laptop up at a higher height, more like monitor height. If you're using it as a second monitor, also raise it up. Have it up so you can see it just like your main monitor. A lot of us now have been working with sit-stand workstations. This is one option for getting it at home. I've used an ironing board, if any of you remember what those are for. You don't have to worry about wrinkles anymore. I've raised my monitor up on, in this case, encyclopedias. Any large, firm, solid, stable structure would work. Reams of paper, boxes, small tables, something like that. This gets me up, head height for the monitor, keyboard position so my wrists are straight, reverse that binder, mouse right here to the side, I'm ready to go. Think outside the box, but be safe. If you're stacking stuff, make sure they're stable and secure. Avoid trip hazards with wires running all over the place. And definitely avoid electrical hazards. Don't plug one power strip into another. Power strip should go directly into the wall. The most important thing is be flexible and be active. Keep those breaks, even every 6 to 10 minutes, stretching, standing up, sitting down, standing up when you take phone calls. Stay in motion as much as possible. Be safe today.
Yeah, I thought it was nice to share that video. It's very well done. If you would like a copy of that to share with your employees or share at a safety team meeting, please let me know. I can send you the link to that video. It's out there on YouTube. So it's a good little reminder of some ways that you can use things around the house, some practical ways to help with ergonomics. And it really does make a big difference in with your aches and pains. I think as we start to age, we get more aches and pains and we need to be more cognizant of that. So now I want to switch to gears, just to give you a little BWC update and what we've been doing, especially for the past year. As Craig mentioned before, and Michelle as well in her opening comments, I mean, it has been a year of change and having to get used to things, to doing things differently. And I can tell you as a state agency, we've had to pivot pretty quickly, just like most businesses. And we're now doing things that we never thought would be possible. We started out last year giving a dividend, and we ended up giving 3 last year, a total of 3 dividends. So the first one in April, we gave $1.4 billion back. And this was based on an employer's 2018 premium. And it was 100% of that of the 2018 premium. So 100% of your 2018 premium was given back to you in April of 2020. So that was the first thing that we did. And if you think about that time frame, a lot of uncertainty was there, and not knowing what the future was going to be. And for many businesses, this was a lifeline to help them over that hump. If you're familiar with the way workers' compensation collects premiums and pays out benefits, we collect premium each year to be able to pay out any claims we have in the course of that year. Claims have been down historically, and claims costs have been down. I think that goes a lot back to what employers do on their with their safety. Employers, the accidents are not costing us much money. I think they're preventing a lot more accidents than they have in the past. And once an accident happens, they have things like transitional work that helps control that cost. So if we have too much in premium, then we give that back to you. And we were in a position to be able to give back 100% of that premium in April. And that was very timely for a lot of employers. And then in October, we were able to give back 100% of the 2019 premium. So that was $1.34 billion. And then in December, we gave back the $5 billion, which was 372% of that 2019 premium. So that was the large checks that came out in December. And again, you know, we were in a position to be able to do that. I think we're in a position now that we won't be able to do that in the future. We've had that question asked. I think we're kind of down to the level that we need to be, but you know, we luckily had that funding available, and it was that lifeline, and it was that money that a lot of employers used to pay their rent and pay those paychecks. That was so important in that time. So that was the big thing that we did in 2020 is we gave back nearly $8 billion to Ohio businesses. The other thing historically is we've been cutting our rates. And if you think about workers' compensation, we pay for two things. We pay for the medical costs associated with a work-related injury, and we also pay for compensation while that person is out recovering. So it's tied to wages. Both medical and wages have been increasing, but our rates historically have been decreasing. So, and for public employers premiums are calendar year, based on calendar year. So in 2021, January 1st of 2021, the average rates went down by 7.9%. For public or private employers, last July, they went down 7.1%. I'm sorry, 7.1% for this upcoming July. So although the medical costs are going up and the wages are going up, workers' compensation rates are going down. And historically, they've been going down as well. For the number of years, you can see the decrease in the number of years for both the private and also the public rates. And rates are the lowest than they've been in 40 years, so that's great. The other thing that we've been doing is we've been sending out masks and face coverings to all of our employers. And we did this over 2 different shipments. First, back in the summer, we sent out 23 million masks to 197 employers. We started in May, took us through August to deliver that first shipment. And then we're starting to send out the second shipment of another 23 million. I happen to have a BWC policy. I have a domestic policy that I keep open in case I hire somebody to cut my grass occasionally, do some landscaping. So I do have a workers' compensation policy. And yesterday on my doorstep, I received my face coverings. This, with the second round, these are all made in Ohio. So we wanted to make sure that we were tapping into Ohio-based employers to help with their business models. And it's a very sturdy face covering. Most of them are white. We did allow them to do black and blue. I think they were having difficulties getting some of the white fabrics, but all of you either will or have already received, you should have already received your first round, but the second round, we're still finalizing some of those. I think it will take until the end of May. We started in December sending those out. and we'll finish up in May, sending out the second round. It's taken us a little longer, the second round, making sure we're getting them from Ohio employers, but it is a very sturdy, very nice cloth face mask that we're sending out. So keep your eye open for that if you haven't already received those. You're not billed for those. Those are covered out of your premium, so you don't have to order them. I wasn't expecting my shipment. I was expecting some of the things I ordered online this weekend, but I wasn't expecting my workers' comp mask that I was able to get yesterday. The newest thing that we announced is that this indoor air quality improvement assistance program. This is something that we're tapping into federal funds. BWC is basically distributing them for the federal government, but this covers the cost of improvements for heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems. The goal is obviously to weaken that spread of COVID-19. So many facilities, especially those serving the elderly and other vulnerable populations, have had to update their air quality systems to be able to filter some of that out. So as part of the CARES Act, this indoor air quality improvement program will pay up to $15,000 to help cover the cost of inspections, assessment, maintenance, and improvements. So it's a good little bit of money to tap into. The eligible facilities includes those serving those elderly populations and vulnerable populations, which are nursing homes, senior centers, hospice, group homes, substance use disorder, residential treatment providers, and others. So the expenses have to be incurred between March 1st of 2020, which is, as you all know, was kind of the start of the pandemic, through June 30th of 2021. The deadline to apply for these funds is June 30th. So you can go to our website to get some more information on that. Again, if that's something you qualify for, I encourage you to tap into those funds and to improve that quality air. The other thing that we recently announced at our Safety Congress that we had virtually in March is that we're reopening some of our grants. Initially, at the beginning of the pandemic, the grants were put on hold. Many of you are familiar with the safety intervention grants. What we announced at Safety Congress is that we reopened several of these specialty grants. That is the trench safety grant, excuse me, the firefighter exposure grant, the employers working with persons with developmental disabilities, and the school safety and security grants. So those grants are all back open. If that is something that you're interested in, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, our website has a lot of valuable information that can help you get started with those as well. If you're familiar with our website, you can actually go to safety and training. So that's the Division of Safety and Hygiene. Right there from the homepage, you can go to safety and training, and you can select a variety of things. You can select safety consultations, safety grants, safety video. These are all things that are available. Craig was mentioning some of these in part of his presentation at the beginning. We are all here still available to help. We have to help virtually. We've been very creative in finding ways to help you virtually, with all these Zoom meetings and FaceTime and being able to video a work process. Our safety and hygiene consultants are still available to help you and help you through your safety process. So the services that are available, and again, they're no additional cost and they're strictly consultative, is we can do those safety consultations, looking at programs, ergonomics, industrial hygiene. Industrial hygiene is air and noise sampling. Craig had mentioned those previously as well. Safety management, assessment, and enhancement. Safety team development. A lot of times our safety consultants will help employers start their safety teams. If they already have one started, sometimes it just needs to be rejuvenated and work through that process. So they're available to be that fresh set of eyes to help give that boost to that safety committee. Sometimes you get in that rut and it's in place, but it's not very functioning. And so they're available to help with that. We've moved all of our classroom-based training to online for obviously reasons with COVID. At some point, we hope to get back to that classroom-based training. But this is something that is, again, it's part of your premium. It's no additional cost. We even do things like the OSHA 10 and 30-hour classes. So something you would pay a lot of money to have done privately that we're able to provide to employers. We also have those safety intervention grants and wellness grants available. We have an extensive video library up in our Columbus that you can use, and you can you can borrow videos from our video library. The only expense for that is the return postage back to Columbus. And they have thousands of videos on a variety of different subjects. And many employers will use this video library to help with their training program, that they're able to borrow that video, use it as part of their training topics, and then send it back. Sometimes employers will use that to help be able to preview a video, whether they want to purchase it at some point in the future. They want to make sure it's really what is going to meet their needs, and they can borrow it, and then maybe they want it as part of a monthly training that they do as part of their orientation that they might want to eventually go by. So there's many uses for our video library and research library too. If there's subjects that you would like some more information on, you can talk to our librarians and they can do some research for you and provide you with that information. So again, all of that stuff is on our website. Our website is www.bwc.ohio.gov. Lots of information on that website. With that, here is my contact information, and feel free to contact me, and let me give you my direct email address as well. It's Kathleen.1 at bwc.state.oh.us. So with that, I'll kind of close. Thank you again for attending. As Michelle and Craig both kind of mentioned in their opening comments, I know it's been a difficult year, and we are there to support you. A lot of changes that have taken place over the course of the past year. The Safety Council has been great. Julia, thank you for keeping everything together. It's been great. So here again is my email address, Kathleen.D.1 at bwc.state.oh.us. And that phone number comes directly to me as well, 513-785-4591. And if I can't answer your question, I will definitely get you in contact with the subject matter expert at BWC that can. All right, well, thank you all for attending, and have a great day, and hope to see you next month.